So this story takes place back in the late summer of 2007. I was 18 years old, had graduated high school, and was looking forward to starting college in just a couple of weeks. I'm a tall guy, a bit over 6 foot, and was lanky in build back then. My dad and I had a yearly tradition of going on a trip to Redding where we'd stay at a hotel for the weekend and go to the water slides, see a movie, grab dinner from a fancy restaurant or two, and just generally have a good time away from home. It was Saturday, and we'd gone to the water slides all day. Once the sun was setting, we decided to go to In-N-Out for dinner, and then had planned to go to the movies later in the evening. We were going to see Rush Hour 3, but on this particular occasion, my dad had gotten pretty wiped out and decided he would just relax at the hotel. I still wanted to go to the movies and said it was okay. He dropped me off at the movie theater, which was only a couple of miles from the hotel we were staying at, and I told him that he didn't have to wait up for me. I'd just walk back after the movie. While I was waiting in line, I noted that there was a surprising amount of people around my age, all going to see a movie called Superbad. It was starting 10 minutes later than Rush Hour 3, and I was so curious to see what it was about that I changed to that movie. It was a great time. The movie let out close to midnight, and I was full of energy. The moon was full, and it was warm at night in Redding, low 70s, so I was in good spirits as I started a leisurely walk back to the hotel. On my way back, I noticed a silver car pulling out from a nearby street. It was late and on a quieter part of the city, so there wasn't a whole lot of traffic at the time, so it was notable. It slow rolled up to me, and the passenger window rolled down. Inside was a guy who might have been in his late 20s or early 30s. He was clean-shaven with dark hair and decently dressed. He asked me if I needed a ride. I thought it was a little odd, but he was smiling and seemed friendly enough. I'd had such a good day and was still full of energy though, so I said no thanks, and I told him I was just going to walk back to my hotel. His smile faltered for a moment, and he asked if I was sure. I nodded, assuring him I'd be all right. He shrugged his shoulder and asked one last time if I was certain. I said yeah, and then I began to walk. He drove off, and I thought that was the end of it, but it wasn't. About 2 minutes later, I was still walking along the street, and I saw a car coming on the opposite side of the road. There was a cement divider on the center of the road, and it only had a couple of areas where cars could turn around. I had been distracted with my own thoughts and wasn't looking for it, but I thought it might have been the same car. I glanced back and could just barely see where the road curved, and the car turned around at the same intersection. It turned around and came driving back my way, and now I knew that it was the same car with the guy I'd talked to earlier. I saw him looking at me as he passed by me again. Chills went down my spine. I began to walk faster, but not too much, as I was giving him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he thought he'd forgotten something, but then realized he hadn't. Either way, I was paying attention now. Sure enough, as I walked forward, I saw him drive by on the opposite side of the road again. Any doubts I had disappeared, and now I was on edge, ready to bolt if I saw his car slow down next to me. I saw him drive by again, but also some other truck drove by on the opposite side of the street, and his car passed me by. At this point, I couldn't see where he could turn around, but I knew the streetlights he could use weren't too far ahead either. I looked around, and across the street from me were some businesses, and they had bushes in front of them. I waited till I couldn't see the silver car anymore, and I ran across the street and hid behind the bushes, using them for cover. I watched and waited. I tied my shoes tight as my heart was pounding, hoping he wouldn't come by again, but he did. I saw his silver car drive by my hiding spot and let out a sigh of relief as he didn't suddenly decide to drive into the parking lot where I was, but I didn't move either. I knew that he could turn around again, so I kept waiting. He drove by again on the opposite side of the street. I then started counting for 10 minutes, 600 seconds. I decided that if I saw his car drive by, I would start again, and I would still be ready to run, just in case. The 10 minutes went by, and I didn't see his car again. I got up and shakily made my way back to the hotel, keeping any eye out for any new cars coming my way. None did. My dad woke up when I got back to our hotel room, and I told him what happened. He got up and took a look around the hotel parking lot before saying that we should lock the door, draw the curtains, and get some sleep. We left early the next day. I'm really glad I didn't get into that guy's car that night, because I just recently heard that there had been a number of kidnappings in that area around that time, with people getting taken after getting into seemingly friendly strangers' cars at night. This occurred around 1999-2000. My best friend and I were avid outdoor adventurers and amateur pot growers. We would frequently find secluded places in the woods that allowed for ample light and shade for plants to grow and that would not allow them to be easily found. One particular day, we went to an annex of trails located near an NJ State Park trail system. The trails weren't in the park, but I had hiked them before, and I knew that they weren't that frequented. We had gone out that day with our seeds partially sprouted in moist paper towels. We parked the car at the trailhead and started hiking in. We covered a mile or so and then ventured off the trail and into the woods. We found a clearing, planted the seeds, and tied a few barely visible ribbons off to mark the way to the plant spot to check them in the future. My friend and I got back on the trail and started walking back to the car when my friend noticed a man in the other direction, just staring at us. He was probably in his 30s or 40s, bald head, normal clothes. We didn't think anything of it for the most part, but we definitely kept looking back, as anyone would when someone is behind them in the woods. We saw that he was walking 60 or so feet behind us. It seemed weird, but it was probably more so due to us having anxiety that we planted seeds. We picked up the pace, but the man also seemed to pick up pace, as we weren't gaining any distance. At one point, we decided to just get off the trail and let him pass. We turned off the trail and walked into a thicket of sticker bushes, which I remember vividly getting shredded on. We got deeper into the woods and heard cursing. When we turned around, the man was coming through where we entered. It was at that moment we actually became scared. Mind you, we are two young, strong 19-year-olds, but a man following you in the woods is damn creepy. We kind of made a U maneuver to outflank him and came out of the woods a bit further down the trail. Once on the trail, we ran. As we were running, there was a fork in the trail, and my friend went right and I left. I realized my mistake, as my buddy was going down the correct path, and I wasn't. So I turned around and started running back towards the fork to follow my friend. As I was running towards the direction we came from to get to the fork, I could see the man running towards me down the trail. He was a distance away, but not far enough in my eyes. Survival mode kicked in, and I ran as hard as I could. I caught up to my friend who was walking at that point. I screamed, "He's after us!" and we both booked it to all the way to the car. We got in the car shaking and out of breath. We backed up and started to get out of the parking lot when the man appeared at the trailhead. He stopped there and just stared at us as we drove away. I always wonder what that was all about. Did he want to kill a couple of 19-year-olds? Was he also doing something illegal in those woods and wanted us gone? My buddy and I still laugh and talk about that day 22 years ago. I am an 18-year-old female and just left school in my hometown early this year. This is quite a long story, but I'll try to keep it as short as possible. Last year, I came across a really creepy dude. I first saw this guy walking home from school one day, and he was standing out in front of his gate. He stopped me to talk to me, and the first thing he said was,
"You're so tall. Do you model?"
and stuff like that, which I thought was creepy for a 60-year-old man to say to a 17-year-old in school uniform. It got worse from there, and he told me how beautiful he thinks blonde women are. I'm blonde. He said these things while staring at me intensely. I was so uncomfortable and had to get out of there, so I told him my dad was waiting for me at home, and I had to go, and I walked away as soon as possible. His house was right at the turnoff to my street, and he could see my house from his driveway. As I walked to my house and opened the front door, he was watching me from his driveway the whole time. A few days later, I was walking home again, and I got halfway down the road and saw him standing at his gate again. I immediately said, "Nope," and turned around. I took a different route down another street and walked across a field to get home and completely avoid him. I walked home that way for the rest of the year. At the end of the year, I finished high school. I started working at a cafe over the summer in the main street of my town. I completely forgot about the gate man until one day he walked in. He recognized me straight away and asked me what my name was. I told him a name similar sounding to my real name because I didn't want him to know my real name. He told me,
"Now that I know you work here, I'm coming in way more often,"
smirking at me. And he did. He came in almost every day I worked. He would sit directly across from the counter and just stare at me. He knew I noticed, and it didn't bother him. He just kept staring. One morning, he told me he was going across the road to the bank to get money out to tip me. I didn't want to talk to him, so once he had gone, I went out the back to mop in the chiller and shut the door. I stayed out there for about 20 minutes, and then when I closed the chiller door, he was standing right behind it, staring at me. I don't know how long he'd been standing there waiting for me to come out. I started seeing him around town a lot and got paranoid that he was following me. I was so creeped out and uncomfortable at this point, so I told my manager, who just laughed and thought it was funny. She never did anything about it. He started coming in when I wasn't working, asking where I was. My coworkers would just say, "She's not working today. We don't know where she is." He eventually worked out my real name. I told my dad and my boyfriend about it, and they told me if he comes in again, to ring them. I made sure to look at his name when I scanned his vaccination pass in case anything happened. He came in again the next day, and he said to me,
"It's cool you're going to
my
beauty school.
name,
I'm moving to
my city name.
next year. It'll be sad to see you go."
The creepy fucking thing about this is I never told him I was going there, and I never would. I asked my coworkers if they told him, and they all swear that they didn't. I don't know how he found that out. Looking back, I should have gone to the cops, but I was worried I didn't have enough evidence, and they wouldn't believe me. I'm safe now, and have moved away, but I'm so glad nothing happened to me. I only live 2 hours away though, and I go back there to see my family often, so I'm scared I'll run into him. I hope I never see that man again.